Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld Beta 18. My name is Pete and today we complete episode 2 of our Rimworld Ice Sheet Tribal series, including our first act of cannibalism, because let's face it, if we don't then this series will very quickly come to an end. For now the polar bear is still serving us well, but we won't be able to feed on that forever, so I'm hoping for a small raid or maybe even a crashed escape pod soon. Should we have a raid, however, we need to be a bit more prepared than we are at the moment, and so as Cambiar is finishing up his meditation here, I have queued up some mining for him. Now we have built our first shelter here in a very defensible position, so our first line of defense will be small and therefore also rather cheap. In total we will need 115 steel, but we still have 66 stored, so we'll have Cambiar mine 2 blocks here and that should be more than enough. Our defense line will then cover this narrow part here, and it consists of a door for us to come and go through, 5 pieces of wall to block off entrance, and a steel deadfall trap on the other end. That trap part is now the only point where hostiles can go through, and the trap can seriously hurt them and might even kill them in one go. Now we will expand on that, probably in the next episode, but for now against single unarmored enemies it should do a fine job. Now building our defense line here, I have used some steel that was originally meant for another purpose. You may remember that in the last episode I also spoke about crafting a club. And that's exactly what we're going to do next, because a defense line is good, but if Cambiar is still unarmed if we go into combat, we are in for a tough time. So for the club we need 40 steel, and since we still have 16 in store, we only need to mine 1 additional block. So here we are, and Cambiar can now begin crafting. Alright, lovely, the club is finished and Cambiar can immediately equip it. And if we have a look at the info tab here, we can see that it has a melee damage per second of 5.57, and actually that should be 5.58, but I'm not going to argue, and that results from the club having a damage value of 12 and an attack speed of 1 attack every 2.15 seconds, so per second it does slightly below 6 points of damage. Just for comparison, Cambiar's fists, the only alternative we have at the moment, have a melee DPS of 4.38, which is the result of a substantially lower damage value of only 7, as well as a cooldown of 1.6 seconds. So with the club we are definitely better prepared for whatever challenges we might face. And with the defenses taken care of, at least for the moment, I think we can now talk a bit more about research. Now we are playing a tribal scenario, and so a lot of the stuff that you normally start with is not researched. Additionally, research will also be a lot slower compared to the normal crash landed scenario. So we should probably start with some of the more essential stuff. Still, we have a few options to choose from. Complex clothing would be the first one, allowing us to make warmer clothing. However, we don't really have any materials for that at the moment, and we might even find some warm clothing on raiders or crash landed survivors, so while we do want to research this eventually, it's not really a necessity right now. Stone cutting is also very interesting, allowing Cambiar to make workable stone blocks from the stone chunks he mines, and we want to research this relatively early in the game, otherwise we will end up wasting valuable steel resources. For the moment though, I don't really plan on building all that much, and we still have plenty of steel in the vicinity, so stone cutting is not a priority right now. Now we could also go a bit more advanced and research smithing, for example, but we can't really do much with that unless we have a fuel smithy, which needs wood, which we don't have, or an electrical smithy, which we also can't use because we haven't researched electricity yet. Electricity is, as you can see here, definitely a must-have technology, as it is the gatekeeper to pretty much every other advanced technology in the game. For the moment though, we will focus on something a bit more basic, and of course I'm talking about beds. With the Beta 18 update, beds are now a technology that needs to be researched, and I think Cambiar has slept on the floor for long enough. A bed will get rid of the negative slept on the floor thought, and it will also provide him with a lot more comfort at night, even if it's made from steel, so beds are the first technology that we start researching. And thanks to Cambiar's rather high intellectual skill, the research project will proceed at a nice pace, and because he has one flame of passion in the skill, he will even gain some joy while he researches. However, here you can see it, the research bar will fill very slowly, so it will take a few days until we have beds researched. Alright, it is now the next day. The research project has progressed somewhat, but Cambiar is getting some rest at the moment. Not for long though, because right here we have our first crashed escape pod. And at this point in the game that means only one thing: our food situation has just improved a lot. So we have Miller here, and Miller is currently bleeding and will therefore die in 18 hours. And character-wise, Miller is also nothing too special, incapable of both violence and researching. That now removes every last chance he had of joining the colony. Still, we are going to wake Cambiar up and send him over to Miller, and while he's on his way we will quickly place a sleeping spot here, because this now allows us to rescue Miller. Now, the reason I'm doing this is not because I want him to live. I am actually a lot more interested in his clothing. You see, in Rimworld there is a difference between clothing and clothing worn by a dead person. Clothing that was worn by a dead person is not only less valuable, but it will also give the wearer a thought that negatively affects his mood. So if you want to strip someone of his clothing, you better do that while he's alive. If that person is far away from your colony though, that means hauling the clothes will take a lot of time, because for some reason a colonist can only haul one piece of clothing at a time. To get around that, we will simply haul the entire person, including his clothing. That way we can strip him close to our base, and hauling will only take a fraction of the time. And now that Miller is lying out in the open in the freezing cold, bleeding out and with no clothing to protect him, it won't take long until he's dead and Cambiar can get his first taste of cannibalism. For now, the polar bear will have to do though, and then Cambiar can get some rest. We can then quickly expand our stockpile here. It is getting a bit crowded out front, and so we can make a bit more room. The entire area is roofed already and therefore well protected. Now awake again, Cambiar is just about to equip the synth thread pants that we just stripped off Miller. Both pants and t-shirt, however, only have a cold insulation of minus 3.5 degrees. So even if they're worn together, that's only minus 7 degrees, while Cambiar's tribal wear protects from minus 10 degrees. And since we cannot wear them all at once and have to decide between either tribal wear or pants and t-shirt, we will stick with the tribal wear for the extra bit of cold protection, even though the pants and t-shirt are a bit more useful in combat situations. We can also see here that Miller is about to die shortly, so we just have to wait a few seconds. And here we go, as morbid as it sounds, more food for Cambiar. Very interesting, by the way, Cambiar actually gets a positive moodlet from this. Apparently he had a bit of an attitude towards Miller, and now that his rival is dead, Cambiar gets a slight mood boost. For the next meal though, we will once again go with the polar bear, and we are immediately punished for that as Cambiar comes down with food poisoning. Now, food poisoning is one of the few illnesses that cannot be treated. All we can do is to simply wait it out. Food poisoning severely drops consciousness, so moving, manipulation, talking and eating are all quite a bit worse, and once again there's absolutely nothing we can do about that. As you can see here, thanks to food poisoning, Cambiar will also vomit occasionally, which not only dirties up his room but also increases his hunger need quite rapidly. And because Cambiar isn't doing so great anyway at the moment, let's have him commit his first act of cannibalism now. Now, as you can see here, this gives him a very powerful positive thought, although we have to keep in mind the penalties for eating a corpse still apply. Let's quickly also prioritize cleaning over research, so that Cambiar quickly cleans up his vomit before heading back to the research bench. Just a few moments later then, we once again get cargo pods. In the last episode we received some hops that way, but this time we have something a lot more useful, 96 units of hare meat. And with us battling against a constant food shortage, this is one hell of a drop right here. Now, while the food poisoning has already worn off, Cambiar is now feeling the effects of hypothermia, which means in his first go he can only haul back 65 of the normal 75 units. Still, this provides us now with a few reserves for the next few days. Now, there are 31 units of meat still up there, but looking at Cambiar's food and rest needs, we're not going to make another trip today. Instead, he can rest for a while, then have a bit of the meat for breakfast, and now I think he's ready to bring home the rest. Alright, wonderful. Polar bear corpse, human corpse, and a bit of meat. Our current food situation doesn't look half bad. Right, quick fast forward, Cambiar has eaten something and he's also slept for a while, otherwise nothing of importance has happened, and right now I would like to take care of the small but negative in darkness thought. This gives him a tiny -3 mood penalty, and so it isn't all that bad, but I have found a way to easily remove it. And removing is the key here, because we're going to remove one tile of roof directly above Cambiar's chair. This will now let light into that one space where he's sitting, without really having a noticeable effect on the room's overall temperature. So this immediately gets rid of the in darkness thought, and so at least when Cambiar is crafting, eating or researching, we have one less problem to worry about. And the events don't stop, but this time we have one that we want to stay far away from. A herd of elk is passing by, and while that might seem like an excellent opportunity to get some food, there is a risk of aggroing the entire herd, and that would surely mean an early game over. Plus, the animals are actually pretty far away, and beating an elk to death with a club will also take a while, so no, thank you Randy, we'll pass. Alright, it is now the next morning, and I figured that Cambiar could use some fun. At the moment, he's only getting that from meditating, or somewhat slower from researching, but since we have 11 steel left in store, let's simply build him a hoopstone ring here for 10. He can now use that whenever he needs to increase his joy. It won't happen super fast, but it actually gives him a small increase to his shooting skill as well, so he'll want to use it at least occasionally. Another few hours have passed and we have another event, this time an opportunity for peace talks with a hostile tribe. Now, to actually make use of this opportunity, we would have to travel, and while the location here is somewhat close by, that blue spot here, that's us, we still don't have nearly enough food to last us for the entire trip. On top of that, we would actually need a capable negotiator for the peace talks to succeed, and Cambiar's social skill is far away from being good enough. So I think we'll have to ignore this, but don't worry, not participating will not give us any penalties. Okay, so we've jumped ahead more than one day now. As you can see, the polar bear corpse is gone, but I think it's actually gone for quite a while now. But other than that, things have been surprisingly quiet. We are, however, very close to completing our very first research project. So a quick snack for Cambiar, and that's also all of our hare meat gone, and then Cambiar returns to the research bench. And here we are, we have finished our first research, and Cambiar now knows how to build beds. And of course, we want to construct one immediately. A bed has a cost of 35 steel, we have one left in store, so mining only one block might suffice, but I have queued up 2 just to be safe. Alright, perfect, 35 on the first block here, that means we can cancel the other one, then we can remove the sleeping spot and have Cambiar build a proper bed. We'll quickly wait for him to finish meditating though, and then he can start working. Lovely, right, as you can see here, the bed has a comfort rating of 0.64. Just for comparison, the sleeping spot had a measly 0.2. The maximum of the scale is 1, so despite this being a poor quality bed, Cambiar will be quite comfortable. Everything above 0.6, by the way, is enough to give the comfortable thought when used, so Cambiar will get a slight mood boost whenever he's sleeping. So, with the bed constructed, let's now once again talk about research. And while complex clothing, stone cutting or smithing are still tempting, we're actually going straight for electricity next. Once we have that and maybe 1 or 2 other technologies, life will be a lot more pleasant for Cambiar, even though the research project will take a long time to complete. Now, should we acquire any good crafting materials for clothing in the meantime, we will very likely be switching over to complex clothing, as we won't lose any research progress from switching to another project. Right now though, we have Cambiar's first night in his new bed coming up, and as he jumps in we can see the effects immediately. His comfort bar rapidly jumps up to 0.64. Once it passes 0.6, he also gets the comfortable thought for a small 4-point mood boost, and at the same time the -4 negative slept on the ground thought will soon vanish. So that's a nice 8-point swing just from building a bed, and with that we're slowly but steadily increasing Cambiar's quality of life out here on the ice sheet. The next morning then, Cambiar starts his day with another taste of cannibalism, providing him with another boost to his mood, before he then continues to research. And he researches for pretty much the entire day, until the evening where we have a first eclipse. Now, eclipses are nothing to worry about for us at the moment. They do block all sunlight, but that's really only an issue if you grow plants outside or use solar panels to generate power. Cambiar doesn't do any of that, and so he can simply continue researching. Now, it was actually getting so cold outside that Cambiar had to close the door to not get hypothermia inside the building, because the steam vent simply couldn't heat up the room fast enough. This will likely require a bit of micromanagement in the future, but then again, this is only a temporary shelter. Then Randy gifts us a very nice event here. A snow hare has self-tamed. That means Cambiar now has a pet. However, out on the ice sheet, pets are often good for only one thing, and I think you know what that is. Now, we will have to kill the snow hare for food sooner or later anyway, so there's really no point in having it eat our hops. Instead, we can slaughter it immediately to not waste any resources we might be able to sell. And Cambiar can actually also eat it right away. This preserves the human corpse for a while longer, and since the positive raw cannibalism thought is still active, we don't have to renew that for at least a few more hours. And so yeah, here we are. Life isn't exactly great for Cambiar, but it is improving. He has made his first experiences with cannibalism, and he also has a bed now. We still haven't had a raid yet, which is somewhat unusual and actually frightens me a bit, but I'm sure Randy will throw one at us in the next episode. For today, I think we'll make the cut here. If you have any ideas or tips for the next episode, then leave them down below in the comments. If you like this episode, then go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And of course, if you want to support the channel, then feel free to subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!